I was preparing to attend the funeral of my beloved mother-in-law, who had recently passed away, when my phone rang unexpectedly. "Don't even think about coming to the funeral. Go straight back to your parents' house in the countryside," a harsh voice ordered. Perplexed but willing to comply, I made my way home to my rural hometown. Later, I learned from my husband about his estranged and troublesome sister, Daisy. "So, Mom's gone, huh? How much of the inheritance am I getting?" she asked, her complete lack of empathy for the situation leaving me stunned. Her audacity to discuss money at such a time was unforgivable. It was then I decided I would stand up for my mother-in-law's memory and protect her from this vile sister-in-law. In the end, after a fierce confrontation, Daisy found herself in a cold, dark cell. "My name is Sarah, and I'm a simple housewife married to Stephen, an employee at a company, and we have a happy, contented life." I'd always heard that many women struggle with their in-laws after marriage, particularly with their mother-in-law, where conflicts and tension are common. I too had expected the same. However, I was lucky enough to have an incredibly positive relationship with my husband's family. For instance, my relationship with Donna, my mother-in-law, was wonderful. "Sarah, how do you like this cardigan I knitted? I thought it would be perfect for you." "For me? Oh, thank you, it's beautiful, and your knitting skills are amazing. I'm so happy you like it. The weather's turning chilly, so be sure to stay warm." "I will, and if it's okay with you, would you mind teaching me how to knit sometime?" Her smile was always full of warmth, and her kindness touched me deeply. Donna had even helped us out financially on occasion, and I loved her like a second mother. But then, one day, I received the devastating news that Donna had passed away in the hospital. I was shocked, and for a while, I couldn't bring myself to eat or do anything. Still, I knew I had to accept it. Donna had been battling terminal cancer for years, enduring chemotherapy treatments. I often visited her, and no matter how sick she was, she always greeted me with a smile, doing everything she could to protect us from the harshness of her illness. I couldn't just stay home mourning. I resolved to honor her memory with a smile. I began preparing to attend her funeral, which was to take place at my husband's family home. But then, my husband's voice suddenly blared from the phone. "Wait, what? You want me to return to my parents' house? What's going on?" "I'm sorry, there's a problem at the venue. I'll explain everything when I see you," he said. I was completely confused by his words. What could be wrong? I had never heard him sound so frantic before. "Okay, I'll go to my parents' house as you suggested. I'll take a cab and meet you there. Bye," I said, and the call ended. Though I was full of questions, I decided to trust Stephen. If he thought it was necessary, there must have been a good reason. I quickly changed my plans to head to my parents' house in the countryside. When I arrived, my parents were just as confused as I had been. They greeted me, and we waited for Stephen to arrive and explain what was going on. About an hour later, Stephen rushed in. "Sarah, are you okay?" "I'm fine, but what happened to your hand?" His hand was wrapped in a bandage, and he winced as he touched it. "Let me explain," he began. "It turns out, I have a sister, Daisy. She's older than me by 3 years, and she's caused nothing but trouble for the family." Apparently, Daisy had been a rebellious child who had multiple run-ins with the police. Despite everything, Donna never gave up on her, always apologizing for Daisy's actions and even taking responsibility for her debts. "I swear I'll pay you back, Mom," Daisy had promised. Donna believed her, but Daisy eventually betrayed her promise, disappearing and cutting ties with the family. That had been the situation until today. Daisy showed up at the family home on the day of her mother's funeral. You would think she might have matured in all this time, but the first thing out of her mouth was, "So, Mom's dead, right? How much of the inheritance do I get?" Stephen was furious. "Is that really the first thing you say after our mother's death?" he demanded, revealing that Daisy had been disinherited years ago. He told her the real heir was now Sarah, me. "What, Sarah? Who is she? It's ridiculous that someone else gets the inheritance and not the real daughter," Daisy shrieked. Enraged, Daisy snatched Stephen's phone and stormed out, hurling insults as she left. Apparently, the injury to Stephen's hand occurred during the altercation when Daisy bit him. I had quickly locked the phone remotely, but it seemed Daisy had somehow managed to figure out our home address and saw my name and photos on the contact list. "I can't believe this," I muttered, still shocked by the revelation of Donna's daughter and how terrible she was. "I'm sorry for not telling you about my sister. It's a family issue," Stephen said, guilt in his voice. We decided to stay in the countryside for the time being, hoping to keep a low profile. As Stephen left for work the next day, he reminded me, if anything happens, call me on my backup phone. I smiled and waved him off, but inside, I couldn't shake the worry. What if Daisy showed up here? What if she tried to attack me? The thought haunted me. Surprisingly, life in the countryside was peaceful. Days passed without incident, and I slowly started to relax. I hoped the problem with Daisy would simply vanish. But then, everything changed. "Excuse me, are Stephen and Sarah home?" a local police officer asked when he arrived at our door. "What's going on?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. It turned out our city home had been burglarized. The police had just received a call about the break-in, and we rushed back to check on it. When we arrived, our house had been completely ransacked, drawers were left open, and it looked like a storm had swept through. "Is anything missing?" the officer asked. "We'll see," we replied as we checked the house under the officer's watch. While most valuables were untouched, a few $100s that had been in our dresser were gone. A neighbor mentioned they had seen a suspicious woman around the house recently, shouting things like, "Come out and pay me back, Stephen." Could it really be? "I'm almost certain, 90% sure, that it's Daisy," my husband said with a nod, glancing at me. We had just told the police about the recent issues involving my sister-in-law, the interrupted funeral, the stolen phone, and my husband's injured hand. The police seemed to handle things smoothly, probably because we had already reported the phone theft. Afterward, we had to provide a detailed statement at the station, and by the time we returned to our countryside home, night had fallen. The thief was apprehended soon after. As expected, it turned out to be Daisy, my sister-in-law. The police explained that she had been bold enough to stay in a hotel near the scene of the crime after the burglary. She was arrested while casually enjoying a massage from room service, all funded by the money she had stolen from our house. Even though she confessed to taking the money, she denied any intention of committing burglary. The details were murky, but it seemed that when family was involved, things weren't so clear-cut. Later, we were summoned back to the station. The officer in charge led us into the room where Daisy was sitting, sulking in a chair. She suddenly spoke up, her voice filled with indignation. "Stephen, how could you do this to your own family? This is unbelievable." Daisy showed no remorse. In fact, she didn't even seem to think she had done anything wrong. She must have acted the same way during her interrogation. According to her, she hadn't come to rob the house, but to discuss inheritance issues. But since we were always away, she claimed she had no choice but to break the window and enter. The money she took was merely to cover the cost of her stay nearby, she said. Essentially, it was all our fault. What a narrow-minded, selfish way of thinking, to think that someone so dangerous harbored resentment toward me. If I had crossed paths with her while alone, who knows what could have happened? The mere thought sent a chill down my spine. Meanwhile, my husband, Stephen, and Daisy were engaged in a heated argument. "After all these years, you have the nerve to show up and pretend to be part of the family. Just give me my phone back." Fine, I'll return it. You locked it right away so I couldn't even use it properly, just like you, huh? Besides, family is family, right? Mom and I cut ties with you a long time ago, so you have no right to her inheritance. Can you believe that? Leaving all her money to a stranger's daughter instead of her own? Was she out of her mind? Stop saying such disgraceful things, I found myself shouting, unable to tolerate her disrespect toward Donna. Daisy shot back, glaring at me with annoyance. "You're that Christian woman, right? The one who took the inheritance that should have been mine?" "No, I didn't take anything," I responded firmly. "What do you mean by that?" Daisy advanced toward me, her gaze sharp and piercing. I hate to admit it, but I felt a shiver of fear. The words I wanted to say seemed to escape me. Daisy, sensing my hesitation, smirked and began laughing, as if she had already won. At that moment, the police officer cleared his throat and intervened. "Let's all calm down, folks. It seems like there's a lot to sort out. Why don't you all have a family discussion first?" He must have sensed that this was a family matter. "We can talk about the charges and everything else later," he added, attempting to defuse the situation. We arranged a formal meeting later at our in-laws' home, in a living room with carpets covering the floor. Donna's relatives gathered around a large table. The atmosphere was tense, and it was Daisy who spoke first. "If you give me my share of the inheritance, I'll let everything slide. You should be grateful to someone as generous as me." Daisy's arrogance hadn't changed a bit. Well, I wasn't surprised. Someone who hadn't changed in over a decade wasn't going to change in a few days. She kept demanding, "Give me the inheritance." drop the charges, but we had no intention of fulfilling her demands. We've told you repeatedly, you were disinherited, you have no claim to mom's inheritance. Well then, how about you give me some money after you get your inheritance? That ridiculous idea is never going to happen, Stephen said, visibly frustrated. I calmed him down and turned to Daisy, trying to keep my composure. Daisy, have you read all of Donna's will? There's a part that mentions you. I only care about the inheritance. The rest is just her complaints about me. No, Donna was concerned about you. She regretted a lot. Well then, she should have given me the inheritance, Daisy scoffed, annoyed. My anger surged, but I also felt deeply saddened. She saw her own mother, Donna, as nothing but a tool for her gain. Donna didn't give you anything because she knew it wouldn't change you, I said before she could respond. I won't let someone as vile as you have a single cent of Donna's money. You're telling me I have no right? You're not even blood related. I don't want to hear that from someone who abandoned their own blood ties, I shot back, using Daisy's own words against her. Her eyes narrowed, her glare now cold and menacing. It was a terrifying look, but this time, I didn't back down. There's nothing more to discuss, please leave, I said, locking eyes with her. Suddenly, Daisy lunged across the table at me, either out of anger or fear, but she was quickly restrained by Stephen and other family members. 10 minutes later, the police arrived and escorted her out, all while she continued to shout insults. By the time they placed her in the patrol car, her spirit was broken, her shoulders slumped. Later, I heard that Daisy ended up in prison. Our report had been officially accepted, and it turned out she had a large amount of debt to loan sharks. It seemed her obsession with Donna's inheritance stemmed from these financial troubles. In any case, she would lead a miserable life, never seeing the light of day again. She never understood true love. She made her choices, and now she would have to live with them. As we reflected on the events in our home, which was finally calm and orderly after so long, my husband lit incense in front of Donna's portrait and said, I was surprised, Sarah, to see you argue so fiercely. Well, that's because I reread mother-in-law's will, I replied. The truth was, I had gone through Donna's will again the day before speaking with Daisy. I hadn't really had time to fully absorb it before. The will was filled with Donna's heartfelt emotions, almost like a letter. Each word she had written stirred something deep within me. Donna had always been concerned for her child, holding no grudges. She cared deeply for our happiness, and she left this world hoping for our well-being as a couple. As I held my cardigan close, tears started to well up as I thought about Donna. Seeing me like this, Stephen tried to cheer me up. Sarah, would you knit something for me too? Sure, I'll show you how Donna used to knit, I said, wiping my eyes with a smile. We'll make good use of her inheritance. From that day forward, I promised myself to live a happy life, for Donna's sake as much as for my own. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.